The first time my wife banished me to the couch, I actually laughed. Not out loud, of course. Diana would have interpreted that as further evidence of my inappropriate behavior with that neighbor slut. But inside, where my sense of humor still functioned despite 15 years of marriage, I found it hilarious that carrying a moving box up 3 porch steps had somehow transformed me into a serial philanderer. You were practically drooling on her, Diana hissed, slamming our bedroom door so hard the family photos rattled on the hallway wall. Don't even think about coming in here tonight, Trevor. So there I was, sprawled across our uncomfortable sectional at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, staring at the ceiling and wondering when basic human decency had become grounds for exile. The neighbor in question, Melissa something or other, had been struggling with a heavy box of books while her moving truck idled in the driveway. I'd helped her carry it inside. Total interaction time, maybe 4 minutes. Total words exchanged. Thanks so much, and no problem. But Diana had been watching from our kitchen window, and in her mind, those 4 minutes had apparently contained enough sexual tension to fuel a daytime soap opera. I grabbed the remote and flipped through channels, settling on an old western where the good guys wore white hats and the bad guys got what they deserved. Simple times. If only real life came with such clear moral boundaries. The leather couch creaked as I shifted position. Diana had picked this furniture, all sharp angles and decorative pillows that served no actual purpose, except to fall on the floor every time you sat down. Like most things in our house, it looked impressive but felt cold. My phone buzzed. A text from my buddy Jack. Heard you're in the doghouse again. What'd you do this time? Small towns. News traveled faster than gossip at a church social. I typed back, help new neighbor with a box. Apparently that's adultery now. Rough. Beer tomorrow? If I'm still alive. I set the phone aside and tried to get comfortable. But the couch seemed designed by someone who'd never actually slept on furniture before. The cushions were too firm, the armrest too high, and there wasn't enough length for my 6-foot frame. My feet hung off the end like a scarecrow's. Around midnight, I heard Diana's footsteps in the hallway. For a moment, I thought she might be coming to apologize, or at least to tell me this whole thing was ridiculous. Instead, she appeared in the doorway wearing her pink bathrobe and holding a pillow and blanket. Here, she said, dropping them on the coffee table. Don't say I never do anything for you. Diana, this is insane. I helped someone move a box. You helped someone move a box while staring at her ass. I was watching where I was walking so I wouldn't trip. Right. She turned to leave, then paused. And, Trevor, don't think this is just for tonight. You can sleep out here until you figure out how to respect your marriage. With that, she disappeared back down the hallway, leaving me alone with my crimes against matrimony. I lay there for another hour, listening to the house settle around me. The refrigerator hummed. The heating system clicked on and off. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked at shadows. Normal sounds of a normal night in a normal suburban house where normal people lived normal lives. Except nothing about this felt normal anymore. Diana and I had been having problems for months, maybe years if I was being honest. The kind of slow erosion that happens when two people stop trying to understand each other and start keeping score instead. Every conversation became a negotiation. Every disagreement became evidence of fundamental incompatibility. But this felt different. This felt like she was looking for reasons to be angry, manufacturing drama where none existed. I thought about Melissa, trying to remember if I'd done anything that could be construed as inappropriate. She was attractive, sure, probably late 20s, with dark hair and an easy smile, but I'd barely looked at her face, much less anything else. I'd been focused on not dropping her box of books all over the porch. Unless Diana was seeing something I wasn't, unless 15 years of marriage had given her some kind of supernatural ability to detect wandering eyes and impure thoughts, or unless she was projecting. The thought hit me like a cold slap. Diana had been working late more often recently. She'd been protective of her phone, taking it into the bathroom when she showered, sleeping with it under her pillow. She'd started dressing nicer for work, buying new clothes, and spending more time on her makeup in the mornings. I chalked it up to her new promotion at the insurance company where she worked in HR. More responsibility, more pressure to look professional. But what if it was something else? What if Diana was accusing me of cheating because she was cheating? The idea should have made me angry, but instead I felt oddly relieved. It would explain so much: the sudden hostility, the manufactured arguments, the way she'd been treating me like a stranger in my own house. I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator app, adding up the late nights and weekend emergency meetings and mysterious phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. The numbers painted an interesting picture, but numbers weren't proof, and suspicion wasn't evidence. I needed to be smart about this. If Diana was having an affair, confronting her directly would only give her time to cover her tracks and turn the situation around on me. She was good at that, making me the villain in every story, the unreasonable husband who couldn't appreciate everything she did for our family. No, if I was going to figure out what was really going on, I needed to be patient. I needed to watch and listen and gather actual evidence before making any moves. The couch suddenly felt less like punishment and more like a strategic position. From the living room, I could see the driveway through the front window. I could hear Diana's phone conversations through the thin walls. I could monitor her comings and goings without seeming suspicious. Maybe this exile wasn't such a bad thing after all. I settled back into the cushions, pulling the blanket up to my chin. Tomorrow I'd start paying closer attention to my wife's schedule. Tonight, I'd get whatever sleep I could manage on this medieval torture device she called a sectional. Outside, the dog had stopped barking. The house grew quiet, except for the familiar sounds of settling wood and cycling appliances. Normal sounds of a normal night, but nothing about our marriage was normal anymore. And if Diana thought she could play games with me, she was about to learn that I'd been underestimated my entire life. The house always wins, they say in Vegas. But Diana had forgotten one crucial detail. I owned half the house. The next morning, Diana left for work without saying goodbye. I heard her heels clicking across the hardwood floor, heard the jingle of her keys, heard the garage door rumble open and closed. The whole routine happened without her acknowledging my existence. Fine by me. It gave me time to think. I made coffee and scrambled some eggs, eating breakfast at the kitchen table while staring out the window at Melissa's house. She was loading boxes into her car, probably heading to work herself. When she waved at me through the window, I waved back. If Diana wanted to make this neighbor the catalyst for our marital problems, I might as well be friendly. My phone rang. Jack. So, how was the couch? Like sleeping on a park bench made of concrete and false promises. Jack laughed. He was a good friend, the kind who'd help you move a body without asking too many questions. We'd known each other since high school, back when our biggest problems involved finding dates for prom and scraping together gas money. Want to grab lunch today? I'm working on Mrs. Patterson's Buick, but I can take a break around noon. Jack owned a small auto repair shop on the edge of town. It was the kind of place where locals gathered to complain about politics and share gossip over oil changes and brake jobs. If something was happening in our little corner of Maine, Jack usually heard about it first. Actually, yeah, I could use some perspective on this whole situation. Perspective is my specialty, along with transmission fluid and rotational balance. We agreed to meet at Rosie's Diner, a greasy spoon that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and burgers that could stop your heart in the best possible way. I had a few hours to kill before lunch, so I decided to do some reconnaissance. Diana's behavior had been strange for weeks, but I'd been too distracted by work and household maintenance to pay proper attention. Now that I was focused, the patterns became clearer. I went through our joint credit card statements online, looking for unusual purchases or charges. Most of it was routine: grocery stores, gas stations, her monthly hair appointment. But there were several charges at restaurants I didn't recognize, always during lunch hours on weekdays, and a few purchases at Victoria's Secret that hadn't resulted in anything appearing in our bedroom. Interesting. I checked our cell phone bill next. Diana's usage had spiked dramatically over the past 2 months. Lots of calls to a number I didn't recognize, usually in the evenings after she got home from work. The calls were long, sometimes an hour or more. I wrote down the mysterious number and ran it through a reverse lookup service. The result made my stomach clench. Grant Holloway, Diana's boss at the insurance company. Grant was everything I wasn't. Smooth, wealthy, divorced, and completely convinced of his own irresistibility. I'd met him at a few company parties over the years, and he'd always struck me as the kind of guy who considered other men's wives fair game. He had that predatory smile, and the handshake that lasted just a little too long. Diana had always insisted their relationship was purely professional. He's my supervisor, Trevor. Of course we talk frequently, but hour-long phone calls at 9 p.m. weren't about insurance policies and quarterly reports. I felt that familiar burn in my chest, not quite anger, not quite hurt, but something darker and more focused. Diana wasn't just cheating on me. She was cheating on me with her boss, the smug bastard who'd looked down on me at every company function like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. But I still needed proof, real evidence, not just suspicious phone bills and credit card charges. I spent the rest of the morning setting up what I generously called a surveillance system. Our house was old but well built, with thin walls and excellent acoustics. I could hear Diana's phone conversations from the living room if I positioned myself correctly. I made a mental note of her usual schedule and the times when she was most likely to make or receive personal calls. At noon, I drove to Rosie's Diner and found Jack already seated in a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee and reading a newspaper. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Thanks." You always know just what to say to make a man feel better about himself. "It's a gift." Jack folded the newspaper and studied my face. "So what's really going on? And don't tell me this is just about helping the neighbor lady. I've known you too long for that bullshit." I gave him the abbreviated version. Diana's sudden hostility, the couch exile, my growing suspicions about her relationship with Grant. Jack listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making non-committal sounds. "Grant Holloway," he said when I finished. "I know that name. Drives a silver BMW, right? Lives in that fancy development near the lake?" "That's him. Why?" "Because old Mr. Cray was in the shop last week getting his oil changed. You know how he is. Sees everything, remembers everything, loves to share everything. He mentioned seeing a silver BMW parked at the Pineview Motel out on Route 9. Said it was there every Tuesday and Thursday evening for the past month. The Pineview Motel was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be seen. It was cheap, anonymous, and far enough from town that you were unlikely to run into anyone you knew." "Tuesdays and Thursdays," I repeated. "That means something to you?" I thought about Diana's recent schedule. She'd been working late on Tuesdays and Thursdays, coming home around 9 or 10 p.m. with stories about important meetings and deadline pressures. "Yeah, it means something." Jack leaned back in the booth and studied me with concern. "What are you thinking of doing about this, Trevor? Because you've got that look in your eyes, and that look usually leads to trouble." "What look?" "The same look you had in high school when Tommy Morrison kept picking on that freshman kid, right before you put Tommy in the hospital." "I didn't put him in the hospital. I just broke his nose." "And 3 ribs. He had it coming." "Maybe so, but Diana isn't Tommy Morrison, and this isn't high school. You've got to be smart about this." The waitress appeared to take our orders. I asked for a burger and fries, comfort food to go with my comfortable rage. Jack ordered the same, along with a piece of apple pie. "I'm not going to do anything stupid," I said after the waitress left, "but I'm not going to just lie there and take it either. If Diana wants to play games, she's going to learn that I'm better at games than she thinks." "What kind of games?" "The kind where the house always wins." Jack shook his head. "You're talking in riddles now. That's never a good sign." "Diana thinks she's so smart, so careful, but she's gotten sloppy, overconfident. She's making mistakes, and I'm going to document every single one of them." "And then what?" "And then I'm going to make sure she regrets underestimating me." Our food arrived, and we ate in relative silence. Jack kept giving me worried looks, but he didn't push the conversation. He knew me well enough to understand that I'd made up my mind about something, and arguing would only be more determined. After lunch, I drove home and spent the afternoon in my makeshift command center on the couch. I had a clear view of the driveway and easy access to the kitchen, where I could listen to Diana's phone conversations through the thin wall that separated it from the living room. At 6 p.m., Diana came home. She walked past me without acknowledgement, went upstairs to change clothes, then came back down and started preparing dinner. Normal routine, except for the part where she pretended I didn't exist. At 8:30, her phone rang. I moved to the kitchen doorway and listened. "Hi, Grant." Her voice was different when she talked to him, softer, more intimate. "No, he's here, but he's not paying attention to anything except the TV." A pause while Grant said something that made her laugh. I know, but we have to be careful. At least until I figure out what I'm going to do about the situation." Another pause. "Tuesday is perfect. Same place?" My hands clenched into fists. Same place. The Pineview Motel, where Grant's BMW had been spotted every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month. "I miss you too," Diana said. "This whole thing with Trevor is just temporary. Once I have everything sorted out, we can be together properly." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, but I'd heard enough. Diana wasn't just having an affair, she was planning to leave me, and she was discussing strategy with her lover, probably figuring out how to maximize her settlement in the divorce. But she'd made a crucial error. She'd assumed I was too stupid, too trusting, or too beaten down to figure out what was happening. She was wrong on all three counts. I went back to the living room and pretended to watch television, while my mind raced through possibilities. Diana thought she held all the cards, but she'd forgotten something important about poker. The best players never show their hand until it's time to collect their winnings. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. I spent Monday night on the couch again, listening to Diana make another hushed phone call to Grant around 9 p.m. This time she was more careful about what she said, but the tone was unmistakably intimate. She was planning something, and whatever it was, she seemed confident it would go her way. Tuesday morning, Diana left for work earlier than usual. She'd spent extra time on her makeup and was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something black and form-fitting that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "Working late again tonight," she announced without looking at me. "Don't wait up." "Wouldn't dream of it." She paused at the door, as if she wanted to say something else, but then just shook her head and left. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway, then called Jack. "Feel like doing some detective work tonight?" "Depends. What kind of detective work?" "The kind that involves sitting in a parking lot and taking pictures." Jack was quiet for a moment. "You sure about this, Trevor? Once you have proof, you can't unknow it." "I already know it. I just need evidence." "All right, but we do this smart. No confrontations, no drama. We observe and document, nothing else." "Agreed." We arranged to meet at Jack's shop at 6 p.m. That gave me the whole day to prepare. I spent the morning researching divorce law in Maine, paying particular attention to adultery clauses and asset division. The information was enlightening. If I could prove Diana was having an affair, it would significantly impact any settlement negotiations. But I wasn't just thinking about divorce proceedings, I was thinking about something more immediate and satisfying. Around noon, I walked over to Melissa's house. She was in her front yard, planting flowers in the beds beside her porch. When she saw me approaching, she smiled and waved. "Hi, Trevor." "How are you settling in with the new living arrangements?" I must have looked confused because she laughed and pointed toward our house. "Diana mentioned you are sleeping in the guest room now. Something about giving each other space to work on your relationship?" Interesting. Diana had been talking to Melissa about our marriage. That took some serious balls, considering she'd accused me of inappropriate behavior with this same neighbor. Diana said that, did she? She seemed pretty upset about it. Said you'd been distant lately, spending too much time with your friends and not enough time focusing on your marriage. Melissa's expression grew concerned. "I hope I didn't cause any problems by asking for help with that box the other day." Diana mentioned that it had upset her. "Don't worry about that. Diana gets upset about a lot of things these days." "Marriage is hard," Melissa said diplomatically, "but I'm sure you two will work it out. She speaks about you very fondly." I almost laughed out loud. Diana had been playing both sides, painting herself as the long-suffering wife to the neighbors while planning her exit strategy with her boss. It was actually impressive in its calculated duplicity. "I'm sure we will," I said. "Thanks for the concern." I walked back to my house with a new understanding of Diana's game plan. She wasn't just having an affair, she was building a narrative. When the time came to file for divorce, she'd have witnesses who could testify that I'd been distant and neglectful, that she'd tried to save the marriage, that the breakdown was primarily my fault. Clever, but not clever enough. At 6 p.m., I met Jack at his shop. He'd borrowed a camera with a telephoto lens from his nephew, who worked as a freelance photographer for the local newspaper. "This thing can take pictures from half a mile away," Jack said, showing me the impressive equipment. "Professional grade. Whatever we capture tonight will be crystal clear." We drove to the Pineview Motel in Jack's pickup truck, parking across the street behind a cluster of pine trees that provided excellent cover. The motel was exactly what I'd expected. A single-story strip of rooms with a flickering neon sign and a parking lot that had seen better decades. At 7:15, Grant's silver BMW pulled into the lot. He parked in front of room 12 and sat in his car for a few minutes, probably checking his phone or making sure he hadn't been followed. "That him?" Jack asked. "That's him." Grant got out of the car and knocked on the door of room 12. It opened immediately and Diana appeared. Even from across the street, I could see that she'd changed out of her work clothes into something more casual, jeans and a sweater that hugged her curves in all the right places. They embraced in the doorway, and Grant's hands moved to places that definitely weren't appropriate for a professional relationship between supervisor and employee. Jack started taking pictures. "Got it," he said. "Clear shots of both their faces, the room number, the license plate, the timestamp. This is solid evidence, Trevor." They disappeared into the room, and we settled in to wait. I'd brought a thermos of coffee and a bag of sandwiches, figuring we might be there for a while. "So, what's the plan here?" Jack asked. "You going to use these photos in divorce court?" "Maybe. But I'm thinking bigger than that." "How much bigger?" I thought about Diana's conversation with Melissa, about the careful way she'd been constructing her narrative of marital breakdown. She wanted to control the story, to make sure everyone saw her as the victim, and me as the neglectful husband who'd driven her into another man's arms. "She's been playing a long game," I said, "building sympathy, setting up her exit strategy. She thinks she's going to walk away from this marriage with her reputation intact and her bank account full. And you're going to stop her?" "I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person she really is." Jack lowered the camera and looked at me with concern. "Trevor, you're starting to scare me a little. What exactly are you planning?" "Nothing illegal. Nothing violent. But Diana's about to learn that two can play the reputation game." We sat in silence for another hour, watching the motel room where my wife was betraying 15 years of marriage with her smug boss. I felt surprisingly calm about the whole thing. The anger was still there, burning steady and hot, but it was focused now, purposeful. At 9:30, the door to room 12 opened again. Diana and Grant emerged, looking rumpled and satisfied. They kissed goodbye in the parking lot, a long, passionate kiss that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Jack captured it all on camera. Grant drove away first, followed 10 minutes later by Diana. We waited another 15 minutes to make sure they were both gone, then drove back to town. "So, what now?" Jack asked as we sat in his shop, reviewing the photos on the camera's display screen. "Now I start returning the favor." "What favor?" "Diana's been telling stories about me all over town. Time for me to start telling some stories about her." The photos were perfect, clear, detailed, and absolutely damning. Diana's face was clearly visible in every shot, as was Grant's. There was no way to explain away what these images showed. But I wasn't going to use them in court. I had something much more immediate in mind. "Jack, you know everyone in this town. How fast do you think news travels when it's really juicy?" Jack grinned. "Faster than gossip at a church social." "Why?" Because Diana's about to become the most talked about woman in 3 counties. You're going to spread these photos around? Not exactly. I'm going to let the photos speak for themselves, but I might arrange for them to be seen by the right people at the right time. The right people? Diana's friends, her coworkers, her parents, the neighbors she's been cultivating sympathy from. Jack whistled low. That's cold, Trevor. Effective, but cold. She started this game. I'm just changing the rules. We made copies of the best photos and stored them on multiple devices. Insurance in case Diana tried to destroy the evidence later. What about Grant? Jack asked. He's got just as much to lose as Diana does. Grant's married too, isn't he? Yeah. Wife's name is Patricia. She's on the hospital board, very involved in charity work. Pillar of the community type. Then I think Patricia deserves to know what her husband does on Tuesday nights. Jack shook his head, but he was smiling. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I've had a lot of time to think, lying on that couch every night, and you know what I realized? Diana's not the only one who can play the long game. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The uncertainty was over. I knew exactly what Diana was doing, and I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. She was still awake when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and her laptop. How was your evening? She asked without looking up. Productive. How was yours? Long. Lots of meetings. I'm sure there were. She glanced at me sharply, as if she'd heard something in my tone. But I kept my expression neutral, giving nothing away. I'm going to bed, she said, closing the laptop. Don't stay up too late watching TV. Wouldn't dream of it. As she walked past me toward the stairs, I caught a whiff of unfamiliar cologne. Grant's cologne, clinging to her clothes and hair. Sweet dreams, Diana. She paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at me. For a moment, I thought she might say something, apologize, confess, or at least acknowledge the distance that had grown between us. Instead, she just nodded and disappeared upstairs. I settled onto the couch with my phone and started making a list of contacts. Diana's sister. Her best friend from college. Her mother. The neighbor across the street who organized the annual block party. All the people who thought Diana was a devoted wife and upstanding member of the community. By the time I was finished, they'd know better. The house always wins, and I was about to prove it. I decided to start with Diana's sister, Carol. She lived about an hour away in Bangor and had always been protective of Diana, treating me like I wasn't quite good enough for her precious baby sister. Carol was also the biggest gossip in the family, with a mouth that ran faster than a NASCAR engine, and about as much discretion as a foghorn. Wednesday morning after Diana left for work, I called Carol's number. Trevor? She sounded surprised. We rarely talked unless it was about holiday plans or family emergencies. Is everything okay? I'm not sure, Carol. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course, what's wrong? I put just the right amount of worry and confusion into my voice. Has Diana said anything to you about our marriage lately? About problems we might be having? Carol was quiet for a moment. She mentioned that you two were going through a rough patch. Said you'd been distant, spending too much time with your friends and not enough time at home. Exactly what Diana had told Melissa. She was definitely working from a script. Did she mention anything about her boss? Grant Holloway? Her boss? No, why would she? Carol's voice changed, became sharper. Trevor, what's going on? You're scaring me. I think Diana might be having an affair. The words hung in the air like a live grenade. I could practically hear Carol's brain processing this information, running it against everything Diana had told her. That's impossible, Carol said finally. Diana would never do that. She's devoted to you, to your marriage. I hope you're right, but I found some things that are hard to explain. Credit card charges at restaurants I've never been to. Long phone calls with her boss at night. She's been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month. That doesn't mean she's having an affair. Diana's always been dedicated to her career. You're probably right, I said, letting doubt creep into my voice. I don't know what to think anymore. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Have you talked to her about this? I've tried, but she shuts down every conversation. Says I'm being suspicious and controlling. I paused for effect. Carol, can I ask you a favor? If Diana does say anything to you about our marriage or about her boss, would you let me know? I just want to understand what's happening. Of course, Trevor, and try not to worry too much. Diana loves you. Whatever problems you're having, I'm sure you can work them out. After I hung up, I felt a little guilty about manipulating Carol. But she'd been quick to believe Diana's version of events, ready to paint me as the neglectful husband without hearing my side. Maybe it was time she learned that her sister wasn't as perfect as she'd always believed. Next, I called Diana's mother, Margaret. This conversation required a different approach. Margaret was sharper than Carol, less likely to be swayed by emotional appeals. But she was also fiercely protective of her daughter's reputation. Trevor, what a surprise! How are you, dear? Margaret had always liked me, which made this conversation even more difficult. But I needed her to start asking Diana the right questions. I'm fine, Margaret. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. Diana's been working a lot of late nights recently, and I'm starting to worry about her. She seems stressed, distant. She did mention that work has been demanding lately. Something about a big project with her supervisor. Grant Holloway? Yes, I think that was the name. She speaks very highly of him, says he's been a wonderful mentor. I'll bet he has, I thought. I'm sure he has been. I just worry that she's taking on too much responsibility. She's been having a lot of phone conversations with him after work hours, and she seems different when she talks to him. Different how? I don't know exactly. More animated, I guess. More engaged than she's been with me lately. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Trevor, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just concerned about my wife, and I thought maybe you could talk to her. Mother to daughter. Find out if there's something going on that I should know about. Diana would never. I hope you're right, but something's changed, Margaret. And I don't know how to fix it if I don't understand what's broken. The conversation ended with Margaret promising to have a heart-to-heart with Diana. I knew she'd approach it carefully, diplomatically, but she'd ask the questions, and Diana's reactions to those questions would tell Margaret everything she needed to know. By Thursday afternoon, I'd made similar calls to 3 more people in Diana's inner circle. Each conversation was carefully crafted, designed to plant seeds of doubt without making direct accusations. I wasn't spreading gossip. I was asking for help understanding my wife's behavior. The beauty of it was that everything I'd said was technically true. Diana had been working late. She had been having long phone conversations with Grant. She had been distant and different. I just wasn't mentioning that I already knew why. Thursday evening, Diana came home from another late meeting, looking flustered and defensive. My mother called me today, she said without preamble. She asked me some very strange questions about my relationship with Grant. Strange how? She wanted to know if there was anything inappropriate going on between us. Can you believe that? She actually asked if I was having an affair. I looked up from the television with what I hoped was the right expression of surprise and concern. Why would she ask that? I have no idea. She said someone had suggested that I might be involved with my boss. Diana's eyes narrowed as she studied my face. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Me? Why would I know anything about what your mother thinks? Because you're the only person who's been acting suspicious about my work schedule lately. I stood up from the couch and faced her directly. Diana, if people are asking questions about your relationship with Grant, maybe it's because you're giving them reasons to be suspicious. What's that supposed to mean? It means that you've been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for a month. It means you take your phone into the bathroom when you shower. It means you bought new clothes and started wearing perfume to work. It means you talk to your boss on the phone for hours every night. Diana's face went pale, then flushed red. You've been spying on me. I've been living in the same house as you. It's hard not to notice when your wife starts acting like a stranger. I can't believe this. You're actually accusing me of cheating. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm telling you how your behavior looks to other people. If your own mother is asking questions, maybe you should think about what message you're sending. Diana stared at me for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing, like she was trying to find words. Finally, she turned and stalked toward the stairs. This conversation is over, she called back. And Trevor, You can stay on that couch permanently. I'm done trying to save this marriage. Perfect. She'd just given me exactly what I needed. A clear statement that she was ending the marriage. When the time came for divorce proceedings, I'd have witnesses who could testify that Diana had been the one to give up on our relationship. But I wasn't ready for divorce proceedings yet. I was just getting started. Friday morning, I drove to the local coffee shop where Diana's best friend Sasha worked as a manager. Sasha was a piece of work, the kind of woman who thrived on drama and always seemed to know everyone's business before they knew it themselves. She was behind the counter when I walked in, and her face lit up with curiosity when she saw me. "Trevor, what brings you here?" "Diana usually picks up your coffee orders." "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Diana. Do you have a minute?" Sasha glanced around the shop, which was mostly empty except for a few customers with laptops. "Sure, let me grab us a table." We sat in a corner booth, and Sasha leaned forward with the eager expression of someone who sensed gossip on the horizon. "So, what's going on? Diana mentioned that you two were having some problems." "That's what I wanted to ask you about. What exactly did she tell you?" Sasha's eyes gleamed. "She said you'd been neglecting her, spending too much time with your buddies and not enough time working on your marriage. She seemed really hurt about it." "Did she mention her boss at all? Grant Holloway?" "Grant? Yeah, she talks about him all the time. Says he's been really supportive during this difficult period in her marriage." Sasha paused, studying my face. "Why? Is there something I should know about Grant?" I leaned back in my chair and sighed. "Sasha, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to promise me you'll keep it between us for now." "Of course." "I think Diana might be having an affair with Grant." Sasha's eyes widened. "Oh my God, are you serious?" "I found some things. Evidence. I don't want to believe it, but—" I shrugged helplessly. "What kind of evidence?" I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the clearer photos from Tuesday night. Diana and Grant embracing in the doorway of the motel room. Sasha's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Trevor, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to confront her, but part of me thinks I should just file for divorce and be done with it." "Have you shown this to anyone else?" "Just my lawyer," I lied smoothly. "He says it's solid evidence for adultery proceedings." Sasha stared at the photo for another moment, then looked up at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Trevor, I had no idea. Diana made it sound like you were the one who checked out of the marriage." "Maybe I did in some ways, but I never cheated on her." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. I need some time to think about it." We talked for another 10 minutes, with Sasha asking questions and offering advice that I pretended to consider seriously. When I left, I knew she'd be on the phone within an hour, spreading the news to everyone in Diana's social circle. By the time Diana got home from work that evening, her phone was ringing constantly. She answered the first few calls, but I could hear the stress in her voice as she tried to deflect questions and control damage. After the fifth call, she stopped answering altogether. "Something wrong?" I asked innocently. She glared at me from across the room. "You know exactly what's wrong. Someone's been spreading rumors about me all over town." "What kind of rumors?" "Don't play dumb with me, Trevor. This has your fingerprints all over it." I stood up from the couch and walked over to where she was standing. "Diana, if people are talking about you, maybe it's because you've given them something to talk about." "I haven't done anything wrong." "Then you have nothing to worry about." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was starting to understand that I wasn't the clueless, passive husband she'd taken me for. "This isn't over," she said finally. "No," I agreed. "It's not." But I was winning, and we both knew it. The house always wins. Diana was about to learn that lesson the hard way. By Saturday morning, Diana's world was falling apart faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since Friday afternoon. Calls from friends, family members, and coworkers who'd heard various versions of the story about her affair with Grant. She'd stopped answering most of the calls, but I could see the stress eating away at her. She looked haggard, with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous energy that kept her pacing around the house like a caged animal. Around 10 a.m., she finally snapped. We need to talk, she announced, standing in the doorway between the kitchen and living room with her arms crossed. I'm listening. Not here. Somewhere private. Get in the car. I followed her out to the garage, curious about what she had planned. She drove us to the park on the edge of town, where we could talk without worrying about neighbors overhearing. We sat on a bench overlooking the pond, and for a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Diana stared at the water, her jaw clenched tight, while I waited for her to make the first move. How long have you known? She asked finally. Known what? She turned to look at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Genuine fear. Don't make me say it, Trevor. Just tell me how long you've known. About you and Grant? I started suspecting a few weeks ago. I've had proof since Tuesday night. Diana's face crumpled. Proof? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. She stared at them for a long moment, her face cycling through various emotions. Shock, anger, embarrassment, and finally, resignation. Where did you get these? Does it matter? It matters to me. I followed you to the motel, took pictures from across the street, crystal clear images of you and your boss having your little romantic rendezvous. Diana buried her face in her hands. Oh God, Trevor, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain fucking your boss in a cheap motel while telling everyone in town that I'm the one who's destroying our marriage. She flinched at my language, but I was past caring about her delicate sensibilities. It's not what you think, she said weakly. It's exactly what I think. You've been cheating on me for months, probably longer. You've been planning to leave me, building your little narrative about what a terrible husband I am, so you can walk away with your reputation intact and half my assets. That's not true. Which part? The cheating, the planning, or the part where you've been telling everyone that I'm the problem in our marriage? Diana was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I never meant for it to happen. Grant and I were working late on a project and things just developed between us. Things developed. That's one way to put it. I know you hate me right now, and I don't blame you. But Trevor, we haven't been happy for years. We've been going through the motions, pretending everything was fine when we both knew it wasn't. So you decided to solve that problem by screwing your boss? I decided to find some happiness in my life. Grant makes me feel alive again, like I'm worth something. When was the last time you made me feel that way? I stood up from the bench and walked to the edge of the pond, trying to control my temper. Part of me wanted to grab her and shake her until her teeth rattled. Part of me wanted to scream at her about betrayal and broken promises and 15 years of marriage thrown away for a few hours of excitement with a man who saw her as nothing more than a convenient piece of ass. But I'd learned something important over the past few weeks. Anger was a tool, and like any tool, it was most effective when used with precision and control. You want to know when I last made you feel alive? I said without turning around. Every day for the first 10 years of our marriage. Every time I brought you flowers for no reason. Every time I held you when you were sick. Every time I listened to you complain about your job or your mother or whatever else was bothering you. Every time I put your needs ahead of my own because I thought that's what marriage meant. Trevor, but that wasn't enough for you, was it? You needed something more exciting, something more dangerous. You needed a man who would risk his own marriage and your career for a few hours in a cheap motel room. I turned back to face her. Well, congratulations, Diana. You found him. How's that working out for you now? Diana's face was streaked with tears, but I felt no sympathy for her. She'd made her choices. Now she had to live with the consequences. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to stop pretending you're the victim in this situation. I want you to stop telling people that I'm the one who destroyed our marriage. And I want you to understand that your little affair is going to cost you more than you ever imagined. What do you mean? I mean that Grant's wife is going to see these photos. I mean that your coworkers are going to know exactly what kind of mentoring relationship you have with your boss. I mean that everyone in this town is going to know what you really are. Diana's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I already have. Why do you think your phone's been ringing all morning? She stared at me in horror. Trevor, please. You don't understand what this will do to me. My job. My reputation. Your reputation? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You should have thought about that before you decided to fuck your boss in a motel room. Please, I'm begging you. Don't destroy my life over this. I'm not destroying your life, Diana. You did that all by yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth about who you really are. She stood up from the bench and took a step toward me, her hands reaching out in a pleading gesture. Trevor, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, try to save our marriage. Grant doesn't mean anything to me. Stop. I held up a hand to cut her off. Just stop. You made your choice when you decided to betray 15 years of marriage for a few hours of excitement. You made your choice when you decided to paint me as the villain while you played the victim. You made your choice when you decided that I was too stupid or too weak to figure out what you were doing. I never thought you were stupid. No? Then why were you so careless about covering your tracks? Why did you think you could have hour-long phone conversations with your lover while I was sitting 20 feet away? Why did you think I wouldn't notice the credit card charges, and the new clothes, and the way you started treating me like a stranger in my own house? Diana opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. You thought I was weak, Diana. You thought I was the kind of man who would just take whatever you dished out and never fight back. You thought I would sit quietly on that couch while you destroyed our marriage and planned your exit strategy. I stepped closer to her, close enough to see the fear in her eyes. You were wrong. We drove home in silence, the weight of 15 years of marriage settling around us like a shroud. Diana stared out the passenger window while I focused on the road, both of us lost in our own thoughts. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw Jack's pickup truck parked on the street. He was sitting on my front porch, holding a manila envelope and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Who's that? Diana asked. A friend. We got out of the car and walked up to the porch. Jack stood up as we approached, nodding to Diana politely before focusing on me. Trevor, we need to talk. What's in the envelope? More photos, from Thursday night. Jack's eyes flicked to Diana, then back to me. And some other information you might find interesting. Diana's face went white. Thursday night? Your second visit to the Pineview Motel this week, I said calmly. Did you really think I was only going to follow you once? Diana turned and ran into the house, leaving Jack and me alone on the porch. What's the other information? I asked. Jack opened the envelope and pulled out a sheet of paper. Grant Holloway's wife filed for divorce yesterday. Seems someone sent her copies of those photos we took Tuesday night. I smiled. Really? I wonder who would do such a thing. And there's more. Grant got called into a meeting with his company's board of directors this morning. Apparently, having an affair with a subordinate violates their code of conduct policy. That's unfortunate for Grant. Very unfortunate. He's been suspended pending a full investigation. I felt a warm glow of satisfaction spreading through my chest. Diana and Grant had thought they were so clever, so careful. But they'd forgotten that actions have consequences. And those consequences don't always come from the direction you expect. Jack, you're a good friend. Just returning the favor, you've helped me out of plenty of jams over the years. We shook hands, and Jack headed back to his truck. Before he drove away, he rolled down the window and called out to me. Trevor, what you did to those two, it was surgical, precise. I'm impressed. The house always wins, Jack. Diana just forgot which one of us owns the house. I went inside and found Diana sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. When she looked up at me, her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Grant's been suspended, she said. I heard. His wife is divorcing him. I heard that too. Trevor, what have you done? I sat down across from her and studied her face. She looked older than she had just a week ago, worn down by the weight of her choices and their consequences. I gave you exactly what you gave me, Diana. No more, no less. This isn't a game. You're right. It's not a game. It's justice. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to process this new version of her husband, the man who'd been smart enough to catch her, patient enough to gather evidence, and ruthless enough to use it. "I don't even know who you are anymore," she said finally. "I'm the same man I've always been. You just never bothered to pay attention." Diana stood up from the table and walked toward the stairs. At the bottom step, she turned back to look at me. "What happens now? Now you pack your things and find somewhere else to live. This marriage is over." "And if I don't want a divorce?" I smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Diana, after what I've shared with this town about your relationship with Grant, do you really think you have any choice in the matter?" She didn't answer. She just turned and walked upstairs, her footsteps heavy on the wooden steps. I sat alone in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of drawers opening and closing, of suitcases being dragged across the floor, of a marriage ending not with a bang, but with the quiet rustle of belongings being sorted and packed. The house always wins. And finally, after 15 years of marriage and weeks of careful planning, I was collecting my winnings. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still one more move to make, one final play that would ensure Diana never forgot the lesson I'd taught her. The best revenge, they say, is living well. But sometimes the best revenge is making sure your enemy remembers exactly why they lost. Diana moved out on Sunday morning while I was at the hardware store. I'd made the trip deliberately, giving her the opportunity to pack her things and leave without another confrontation. When I returned home, half the furniture was gone, along with most of her clothes and personal belongings. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "I'll be staying with my sister until we can work out the details. My lawyer will be in touch." I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash. If Diana wanted to involve lawyers, that was fine with me. I had documentation of her affair, evidence of her lies, and witnesses who could testify about her behavior. Any divorce proceeding would go very much in my favor. But I wasn't ready for divorce proceedings yet. There was still one more piece of business to take care of. Monday morning, I called Diana's office and asked to speak with the HR director, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been with the company for over 20 years. "Mr. Mason, how can I help you?" "I need to report a situation involving my wife, Diana Mason, and her supervisor, Grant Holloway." "What kind of situation?" "A sexual relationship that's been going on for several months. I have photographic evidence if you'd like to see it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Mason, I should tell you that Mr. Holloway has already been suspended, pending an investigation into this matter." "I know. I'm the one who provided the evidence that led to his suspension." "I see, and what exactly are you hoping to accomplish with this call?" "I want to make sure that Diana faces the same consequences as Grant. She was an equal participant in this relationship, and she should be held to the same standards of professional conduct." Patricia sighed. "Mr. Mason, I understand that you're upset about your personal situation, but using the workplace to settle marital disputes? This isn't about my marriage," I interrupted. "This is about two employees who violated company policy by engaging in a sexual relationship that created a hostile work environment and compromised their professional judgment." "How did it create a hostile work environment?" I'd done my homework on this. Diana received preferential treatment from Grant, better assignments, flexible scheduling, and protection from disciplinary action when she missed deadlines. Other employees noticed and complained, but their concerns were dismissed because of Diana's relationship with Grant. This was mostly speculation, but I was confident that an investigation would turn up evidence to support my claims. Office affairs always created ripple effects, and other employees always noticed when someone was getting special treatment. "I'll need to look into this further," Patricia said carefully. "I have documentation of their relationship, including dates, times, and locations of their meetings. I also have recordings of phone conversations where they discussed how to handle workplace situations in ways that benefited Diana at the expense of other employees." I was stretching the truth here, but not by much. The phone conversations I'd recorded did include discussions of Diana's work situation, and it wouldn't be hard to interpret those conversations as evidence of favoritism. "Mr. Mason, I'll need you to come in and provide a formal statement, along with any evidence you have." I can be there this afternoon. After I hung up, I called Jack. How would you like to help me put the finishing touches on this whole situation? What do you need? I need you to spread the word that Diana's been fired from her job for having an affair with her boss. Has she been fired? Not yet, but she will be by the end of the week. Jack was quiet for a moment. Trevor, are you sure you want to go this far? You've already made your point. My point was that actions have consequences. Diana hasn't learned that lesson yet. What do you mean? I mean, she's still telling people that this whole situation is my fault. She's still playing the victim, claiming that I drove her into Grant's arms through neglect and emotional abuse. How do you know that? Because I talked to her sister yesterday. Carol called to yell at me for destroying Diana's life with my vindictive behavior. Apparently, Diana's story is that she only had the affair because I was such a terrible husband. Jack sighed. So you want to make sure she can't spin this as your fault? I want to make sure everyone knows exactly what she is. A woman who threw away her marriage and her career for a few hours of excitement with a man who didn't give a damn about her. And you think getting her fired will accomplish that? I think getting her fired will make it impossible for her to claim that she's the victim in this situation. That afternoon, I met with Patricia Chen and provided my statement, along with copies of the photographs and documentation of Diana's affair with Grant. Patricia listened carefully, took notes, and asked several pointed questions about the timeline and specific incidents. Mr. Mason, I have to ask, what are you hoping to achieve with this complaint? I'm hoping that your company will enforce its policies equally, regardless of gender or position. Grant has been suspended for having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. Diana should face the same consequences for having an inappropriate relationship with her supervisor. This seems very personal. It is personal, but it's also professional. Diana used her relationship with Grant to advance her career at the expense of other employees. That's not just adultery, it's corruption. Patricia nodded slowly. We'll conduct a full investigation and take appropriate action based on our findings. How long will that take? Probably about a week. I left the meeting feeling confident that Diana would be terminated by Friday. Companies didn't mess around with sexual harassment and favoritism issues, especially when there was clear evidence of misconduct. Wednesday evening, Diana called me. Trevor, we need to talk. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? Where? The park where we talked on Saturday, 7 o'clock. I arrived at the park a few minutes early and found Diana already sitting on the same bench we'd used for our previous conversation. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes, in a defeated posture that suggested she'd been crying recently. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down beside her. What do you want, Diana? I want to know what it's going to take for you to stop. Stop what? Stop destroying my life. Stop spreading rumors about me. Stop trying to get me fired from my job. I haven't spread any rumors. Everything I've told people is the truth. You know what I mean. I turned to face her directly. Diana, you had an affair with your boss. You lied to me about it for months. You tried to make me the villain in our marriage while you were fucking another man. Those are facts, not rumors. I know what I did was wrong. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you think the only thing you did wrong was get caught. Diana was quiet for a moment, staring at her hands. What do you want from me, Trevor? An apology? You want me to grovel? You want me to admit that I'm a terrible person who doesn't deserve forgiveness? I don't want anything from you. I just want you to face the consequences of your choices. I am facing the consequences. My marriage is over. Grant won't return my calls. His wife is telling everyone in town that I'm a home-wrecking slut. And whose fault is that? Mine, okay? It's my fault. I made terrible choices, and now I'm paying for them. But Trevor, please don't cost me my job. It's the only thing I have left. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then, I remembered the weeks of sleeping on the couch while she met her lover at cheap motels. I remembered the lies and the manipulation and the way she tried to make me believe that I was the problem in our marriage. You should have thought about that before you decided to fuck your boss. Diana flinched at my language. Please, Trevor, I'm begging you, don't do this. I'm not doing anything, Diana. Your company is conducting an investigation into your relationship with Grant. If they decide to terminate you, that's their decision. You know they're going to fire me. You know what those photos look like. They look like evidence of an inappropriate relationship between a supervisor and his subordinate. They look like revenge porn. I stood up from the bench and looked down at her. No, Diana. Revenge porn is when someone shares intimate photos to humiliate their ex-partner. What I shared were photos of you and Grant in a public place, engaged in behavior that violated your company's code of conduct. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to destroy my life because I hurt your feelings. I'm not trying to destroy your life. I'm just making sure that everyone knows who you really are. Diana stood up too, and for a moment, we faced each other across the space between the bench and the pond. In the fading light, she looked older than her years, worn down by the weight of her choices and their consequences. I loved you once, she said quietly. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. You loved having a stable, reliable husband who would provide for you and never ask too many questions. But you never loved me. That's not true. If it's not true, then why did you throw it all away for a few hours with Grant? If you loved me, why didn't you talk to me about whatever problems we were having? Why didn't you try to fix our marriage instead of looking for excitement somewhere else? Diana didn't answer. She just turned and walked back toward the parking lot, her footsteps echoing across the empty park. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The satisfaction came from knowing that justice was being served, that Diana was finally facing the consequences of her betrayal. The sadness came from the recognition that 15 years of marriage were truly over, that whatever we'd once had together was gone forever. But I'd learned something important over the past few weeks. Sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. Diana had been afraid to risk her comfortable life, so she'd tried to have it both ways, keeping her marriage while pursuing her affair. That kind of cowardice always leads to destruction. I'd been willing to risk everything: my marriage, my reputation, my comfortable suburban life, to make sure that Diana faced the truth about herself and her choices. That willingness to go all in had given me the advantage I needed to win. Friday afternoon, Patricia Chen called to inform me that Diana had been terminated for violating company policy regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. The investigation had turned up evidence of favoritism and preferential treatment that supported my complaints. What about Grant? I asked. Mr. Holloway was terminated as well. The company has a zero-tolerance policy for this type of misconduct. I thanked Patricia and hung up the phone, then called Jack to share the news. It's over, I said. Diana's been fired. Grant's been fired. Both of their reputations are ruined. Both of their marriages are over. How do you feel about it? I thought about the question for a moment. I feel like justice has been served. And now what? Now I get on with my life. That evening, I sat on my couch, no longer a place of exile, but a comfortable spot in my own living room, and raised a glass of whiskey and a private toast. Diana had tried to play games with me, thinking I was too weak or too stupid to fight back. She'd underestimated me completely, assuming that I would just accept whatever she dished out and never seek revenge. She'd been wrong on every count. The house always wins. And I'd just proven that I was the house.